So, Wargaming gave me a new premium ship to play around with. Wonder what it's like.
There's a yellow rose in Texas that I am gonna see. Nobody else could miss her, not half as much as me. She cried so when I left her, it like to broke my heart. And if I ever find her, we never more will part. She's the sweetest little rosebud that Texas ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You ain't talk about your clementine and sing of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas is the only girl for me. Where the Rio Grande is flowing and starry skies are bright, she walks along the river in the quiet summer night. I know that she remembers when we parted long ago. I promised to return and not to leave her so. She's the sweetest.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the USS Texas BB-35, a premium Tier 5 New York class battleship coming, well, soon, don't know exactly when, to a premium shop near you. She was built in 1912 and commissioned into the US Navy in 1914, one of two New York class battleships, the other obviously being the USS New York. The version that you see here in World of Warships is the World War II version of this ship. She earned 5 battle stars for service in World War II. She fought mainly in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, taking part in convoy escort duties across the Atlantic, and taking part in Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa in 1942, and also, of course, the 1944 Operation Overlord, invasion of Normandy, D-Day, where she provided fire support to American forces going ashore on Omaha Beach. One story that did amuse me about the USS Texas's fire support to American troops in support of the operations in Normandy was that by the 15th of June 1944, American forces had advanced so far inland they were actually coming up to the extreme limit at which Texas could provide gunfire support with her 14-inch gun batteries. In order to accomplish her final fire support mission, they actually had to flood the starboard torpedo blisters with water. This caused the ship to list 2 degrees to starboard, which meant that the gun batteries trained over the port side of the ship were able to elevate high enough to actually reach the targets inland. Texas's Wikipedia page lists a pretty remarkable list of achievements. She's one of only 6 remaining warships in the world to have served in both the First and Second World Wars. Among US-built battleships, she's the first US Navy vessel to house a permanently assigned contingent of US Marines. She's the first US battleship to mount anti-aircraft guns, the first US ship to control gunfire with directors and range keepers, and the first US battleship to launch an aircraft from a platform on her number 2 turret. She was also one of the first to receive the CXAM-1 version of US Navy radar, and the first US battleship to become a permanent museum ship. You can visit her today at the San Jacinto State Park in Texas. And finally, she was the first American battleship to be declared a National Historical Landmark. So, what's she like in World of Warships, and why should you get hot and bothered about her? Well, I can't tell you whether or not she's going to be worth the money, because, as is pretty standard by now, I don't yet know how much she's going to cost. I don't even know when she's going to be available in the premium shop, although given that various community contributors have been given this ship to play around with, I shouldn't anticipate you having to wait too long for this thing to go on sale. What I can tell you is whether or not she's any good. The short answer is, oh hell yes. Very definitely much. This is a good Tier 5 premium battleship. The long answer is, well, it's going to take slightly longer. So, let's take a look at the numbers, and I'll explain exactly why this is a good premium Tier 5 battleship. You're not going to see, at least at first, a huge range of differences between the Texas and the New York. They both have exactly the same survivability rating, the same health, the same armour. On paper, the Texas's firepower is exactly the same as the New York. They both have 10 14-inch or 356mm guns arranged in 5 turrets, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 1 amidships. They both have 15.6 kilometer range. They both do the same damage with armor piercing and high explosive. They both have the same chance to set a target on fire with high explosive. They both have a slow reload, 1.8 rounds per minute, and they both have a very slow 60-second turret rotation speed, although if you give the commander the advanced firing training skill, which you definitely should, that will get the turret rotation down to just under 50 seconds. The Texas and the New York both have the same very weak secondary battery. They only have 6 127mm guns. That's 3 barrels on each side of the ship. That's it. If an enemy destroyer manages to sneak up and get close to you, you're probably going to have to deal with it with your main battery guns. So, given that your secondaries are basically shite, and your main battery guns only have a 15.6 kilometer range, and once ships start getting to within that kind of range, the turrets turn so slowly you can find it difficult to keep them pointed at the target, I definitely recommend that you fit the artillery plotting room modification to your USS Texas, which boosts the range of your main battery guns by 16%, giving you a firing range of 18.1 kilometers, a significant improvement over the stock 15.6. Are there any options other than the artillery plotting room modification? Well, you could think about fitting the AA gun modification instead, because the biggest difference between the Texas and the New York is the anti-aircraft firepower. The Texas boasts an anti-aircraft firepower rating almost 50% higher than the New York. This thing is absolutely bristling with 32 of these 20mm Oerlikons. But the biggest punch in the anti-aircraft arsenal comes from these quad-barreled 40mm Bofors guns. The New York has 10 of these 40mm gun mountings, and with 4 barrels each, that's 40 40mm anti-aircraft guns. It's almost as if America realised they might need some anti-aircraft firepower on their battleships after Pearl Harbor. As well as that, there are also 10 of these 76mm anti-aircraft guns, so if you were to choose the anti-aircraft gun modification instead of the artillery plotting room, I can guarantee you that aircraft from a Tier 4 carrier would not get anywhere near this ship. An aircraft from a Tier 5 or 6 carrier would take significant losses and might lose the entire squadron on the way out. However, you're not likely to run into an aircraft carrier in every game that you play, and I'll guarantee you're going to run into ships in every game that you play, so my recommendation would still be for the artillery plotting room modification to buff the range of your main battery guns. All of those extra anti-aircraft guns do, however, come at a price, and that is going to cost you in manoeuvrability and speed, but only slightly. The Texas is only half a knot slower than the New York, which is already pretty damn slow. It's got a maximum top speed of 20.5 knots. They both have the same turning circle, and the New York has a slightly faster rudder shift time. And that's pretty much it. Well, except it isn't. There is one other big difference between the two ships, and it's not something that you'll see in the paperwork. Instead, we're going to have to take the Texas out for a spin on the high seas in order to show you conclusively why this is a much, much better ship than the USS New York. Tier 5 match on the big race map. There is actually an aircraft carrier on the enemy team, and it's only Tier 4, and I was dearly hoping that this guy was going to send his aircraft against me, because I'd love to show you just exactly how the Texas's anti-aircraft batteries chew up aircraft launched from Tier 4 carriers, but it just was not to be. I didn't see a single aircraft throughout the entire course of this battle, but trust me, if it flies and it goes anywhere near a Texas, it dies. If you play Tier 4 carriers and you see a Texas on the enemy team, just don't. Right? It may seem like a big fat juicy target. You might think, well, no, don't do it. You will lose every aircraft that you send against the USS Texas. And at Tier 4, you don't have enough reserves to replenish them and try your luck against something else. Tier 5 and 6 aircraft carriers, you can definitely take a shot at the Texas, especially if he's sailing unescorted, and you'll probably score some hits, but you'll most likely lose most, if not all, of your squadron as they're on the way out. The anti-aircraft firepower on this ship really is that good. And none of that really comes at a significant price for the USS Texas. The American battleships always had to be narrow enough to fit through the Panama Canal. And if you have a long, narrow ship with lots of weight bolted onto the superstructure, that makes the ship very top-heavy and negatively affects its seakeeping characteristics, but that isn't really a factor here in World of Warships. And so the only real price is a slightly reduced top speed and a slightly reduced rudder shift time. Other than that, there's really no cost for this fantastic anti-aircraft firepower on the Texas. Anyway, target's up, and because I've fitted the artillery plotting room modification to the Texas, the guns don't have a 15.6 kilometer range, they have an 18.1 kilometer range, and that's no Congo, but it's not bad. Of course, just because your targets are within your gun range doesn't mean you should be shooting at them. I haven't been spotted yet, and while there are a number of ships that are inside my 18.1 kilometer range, I don't really have good shots at any of them, so yeah, you could take a couple of speculative shots and would probably miss. And all that would serve to do would be to give your position away and invite return fire. So instead, patience is the name of the game. I'm going to hold my fire, and I'm going to wait until one of these ships presents itself as a decent target. Not the destroyer. I would never hit him at this range. I'd like to shoot the Svetlana over there. That's a very nasty little tier 4 cruiser. But he's managed to get behind an island, and that's when the St. Louis cruises out into the open. So, shots out. And let's see what happens. It's looking pretty good. It's a nice tight grouping. And yeah, that'll do. Well, I didn't get the kill. But I basically took 95% of his health off. 2 citadels and 2 hits. So that's a good start. I do like the guns on the Texas. I like the guns on the New York. I think the New York's a good ship. And the Texas is a New York, except it's better. And it's not just because of the anti-aircraft firepower. It's the turret arrangement as well. Superficially, they're identically the same. It's got 2 14-inch gun turrets up front, both with 2 guns per turret. It's got 2 to the rear. And it's got that 1 turret amidships. Now, those of you who sail the USS New York will know exactly how difficult it is to get all 5 of these gun turrets pointing at the same target. Well, it's not difficult to get all 5 of the gun turrets pointing at the same target, but while you're doing it, you pretty much basically have to expose the entire flat side of your ship to whatever's shooting back at you. You don't really have that issue with the Texas, and that's to do with the placement of the number 3 turret, that midships turret. It actually has better clearance to the front, because it's situated slightly further to the rear on the deck, and it's got better clearance from the superstructure forward of the gun. This means that you can actually get that number 3 turret firing at targets that you're sailing towards, and you can do that in the Texas while angled at about 45 degrees. If you were to try doing the same thing in the New York and get that number 3 turret pointing at the same targets as your number 1 and 2 turret up forward, you'd have to angle the ship around about 50, 55, maybe even 60 degrees, and that makes it embarrassingly easy for an enemy battleship firing back at you to penetrate your hull in the side and therefore start scoring citadels. That's not really an issue in the Texas, and that's a huge difference. There is one downside, however, and that's to do with the placement of the number 4 turret, which is slightly further forward than it is on the New York, and that means that it's more difficult to get the number 4 turret firing at a target in front of you. However, it's still better on the Texas because you can get more guns firing at a target ahead of you while keeping a tighter angle than you can with the New York. And I'm going to demonstrate by shooting at this enemy Congo up ahead. Now, pay attention to the compass, particularly the guns, as they turn green and come into alignment, and look at the angle that I'm sailing at. A New York would never, at this angle, be able to get that midships number 3 turret firing. But I am able to get the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, and the number 5 turrets, all pointing at the target at the same time, while only presenting a 45-degree angle towards that Congo. And since he is clearly not shooting back at me, I can turn the ship slightly and unleash shots from the number 4 turret as well. If I'd been sailing in New York here, I would have still been able to get all of the guns to bear on this Congo, but in order to get the number 1, 2, 4 and 5 turrets pointing at the Congo at the same time, I would have had to be sailing at an angle of 45 to 50 degrees, and to get that number 3 turret pointed at the Congo, I would have pretty much had to turn the ship more or less broadside onto him, and if he'd been firing back at me, that could have been disastrous. The thing about this turret arrangement on the 2 ships is that the way the turrets are arranged on the New York means it's actually better able to bring all of its firepower to bear on ships that are behind it, which means the New York is better at shooting at ships that it's running away from. And it's exactly the opposite on the Texas. The thing is, because both the New York and the Texas only do around about 20 knots, being good at shooting at ships that you're running away from is a complete waste of time, because you're not fast enough to run away from anything. With these ships, you have to be constantly closing the distance, wherever possible, with the enemy, because they're so slow. I mean, look at the Congo, for example, Japanese Tier 5 battleship, and the kind of battleship that you're most likely going to be up against, because it's a very, very popular ship. There's no way you're ever going to run away from a Congo who wants to fight you. His guns have a longer range, and he's 50% faster than you are. So having all of the guns... Ooh, that was a... Didn't expect that one to hit. Yes, anyway. So having all of the guns in a more aggressive placement, it just makes sense. And that's why the Texas is a better ship than the New York. Even though I like the New York, I think it's a good Tier 5 battleship, the Texas is just better. And if I didn't have this artillery plotting room modification, I wouldn't even be able to shoot at this Congo from here. I'd still be frantically steaming at a glacially slow 20 knots, just desperately trying to find something in range of my guns. And so, well, I wasn't able to get any citadel penetrations, which was a bit unlucky because he was sailing broadside onto me, but I did manage to take him down from 20,000 to 12,000 health. Now, I'd love to finish that Congo off, but I have slightly more pressing concerns. There are now 2 enemy battleships, a New York and a Wyoming, just off the ship's head, sailing in the narrows between those 2 islands, and the Wyoming is not at a particularly good angle, and I'm only able to get my number 1 and 2 turrets pointing at him. Because I'm paying attention to what's going on, battleships are slow. It takes forever for the guns to reload. There's no excuse for not stopping to look at what's going on around you. There's an island off my port beam. I could turn to bring all my guns to bear on this Wyoming, but I just run myself aground. So instead, I wait. Got enough clearance now, I can start turning while still keeping a tight angle. The Wyoming has just made a fatal error. He's turned broadside on to get all of his guns to point at me. That is going to cost him his ship. No question about it. There he goes. That just leaves the New York. Now, once again, I'm going to demonstrate the superior turret placement on the Texas. Watch my turret indicators down there in the compass, particularly the number 4 turret, which is the one that's most difficult to get pointed at the target. There it is. Shots out from the number 4 turret when his guns aren't pointing at me. And now I start narrowing the angle again to give myself the maximum possible armor protection when he gets those number 1 and 2 turrets pointing at me. And no damage taken. Now he's fired under no damage. I've got 3 turrets pointing at him. And now the other 2 turrets. And he's still not able to return fire. Now, I could play it safe here and just keep a narrow angle presented towards him and whittle him down, but there's a destroyer closing in, and the secondaries on the New York and the Texas are both terrible. So I took a bit of a chance there, kept the ship at a pretty flat angle, but took relatively minor damage from the New York in order to get more guns firing at him. But now the destroyer's closing in, the New York's on low health, I've got the side of the ship to shoot at, and I have more than enough guns available to finish him off. There goes the New York. Now the Iziaslav, Soviet destroyer. Terrible torpedoes, so I know he's not inside torpedo range. I've turned the ship to point towards him. I've only got 2 gun turrets that I can safely keep pointed at this guy, but it turns out that was more than enough. Thanks to some gunfire coming in from some other friendly ship over to the right there, not quite sure who, but that's a New York, a Wyoming, and an Iziaslav dead, and it only cost me 3,000 health. Now, I could have done that in the New York as well, but, well, one of 2 things would have happened. I would have either taken more damage than I did in the Texas, or I would have had to start sailing away from these guys. And once again, if you're in a ship that only does 20 knots, you really want to spend as little time as possible sailing away from the enemy as you can, because then you have to turn around and sail towards the remaining ships on the enemy team once you've dealt with the ones that are pursuing you, and you only do 20 knots, and it's just time wasted. Right then, can I ninja the kill on this Omaha? 1 good solid hit and he's dead. It's only a light scout cruiser after all, but it is fast, it is manoeuvrable, and when it's manoeuvring at top speed like this, it is bloody difficult to hit. Oh, Congo, he's thirsty for revenge after the paddling I gave him earlier. Oh, scored a hit on the Omaha, hooray! Not enough to finish him, however. Okay, with the Congo there, I'm going to have to stay angled against the Congo's guns. And that's going to limit the number of guns I can fire at the Omaha. But I can definitely get the 1 and 2 turret firing at him, and possibly the number 5 turret at the rear of the ship as well. Yep, there it is. So that's 3 guns I can fire at the Omaha. There's another hit, not quite enough, come on. Got him. Right, now, the Congo. And he is giving me the nice big flat broadside of the ship to shoot at. You know what that means, don't you? That's a paddle in there. Oh, he scored a decent hit in return, but that's alright. I've still got most of my health, and he doesn't. And I think he's decided to try to get the hell out of there. Actually, then again, he is reasonably well angled, and so these shots hit the side of the ship, but they just bounce off his side armour. At this kind of angle, I really should be firing into his superstructure. Instead, I do make a bit of a mistake here. Although it's a calculated risk, I turn to get all of my guns firing broadside at him, because he was about to die and I wanted to be the one to get the kill. This does enable him to do a not insignificant amount of damage to me, but at the end of the day, he's dead. I'm not. He was never going to sink me there. And that leaves just one enemy ship, and I'm still chasing that elusive 5th kill. And he's bloody miles away, and he's in a cruiser, and he's a lot faster than I am. And he's about to sink one of our ships. Oh, there it goes. And I only do 20 knots. Oh, great. Well, I'm going to have to motor if I want to catch him. All credit to this guy. He puts up one hell of a fight. I like the Svetlana. It's a very nice little tier 4 cruiser. Lots and lots and lots of guns. And I do manage to score a couple of hits on him as I'm desperately trying to close the range. And I am able to close the range because he's still engaging one of our cruisers. In fact, he's about to sink him. And if it wasn't for our aircraft carrier, who I persuade to waste his fighters keeping this guy spotted, he might have gotten away. But our carrier did waste his fighters spotting this guy, so he didn't get away. And there's my 5th kill. Check me out, Mum. I'm an amateur. When did that must be a new award. So, Amateur Confederate, which is nice, and the Kraken Unleashed for 5 kills. I think it's fairly safe to say I quite like the USS Texas. It's a very, very good ship indeed. Nearly 1400 base experience. Not bad at all. And 85,000 damage done, all of it with the armour-piercing shells. Didn't hit a single thing with my secondary batteries because they're completely useless. 5 kills, took most of the health off that Congo, and let's not forget the double Citadel on the St. Louis at the beginning of the match that left him on less than 300 health and wishing he was somewhere else. So, yes, the USS Texas New York class battleship with a bit of a difference. Very, very good anti-aircraft firepower, although I didn't get to demonstrate it in this game. There was a carrier on the enemy team, but I didn't see a single one of his aircraft. But it's the placement of that 3rd gun turret that makes all the difference on this ship. It allows you to play this beautiful little battleship much, much more aggressively than you safely can in the USS New York. In all of the respects, they're exactly the same ships, but it's those little differences that make all the difference. That's the USS Texas, coming soon to a premium shop near you in World of Warships. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.